US President Donald Trump has hit out at Pakistan. In a tweet, he said the United States had been foolish in giving Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years. He said Pakistan had given nothing but lies and deceit in return. This is the big breaking story we are broadcasting at this hour. US President Donald Trump has hit out at Pakistan. In a tweet, Trump said the United States had been foolish in giving Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years. He said Pakistan had given nothing but lies and deceit in return. Relationship between United States and Pakistan appeared to have been hitting new lows with each passing day, and this is in continuation of that changing equation. Donald Trump has lambasted Pakistan and has gone on to say that the US was foolish in giving Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years. Joining me on the broadcast is my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran. He's joining me from WION's newsroom. Ramesh, very strong words from Donald Trump, and the kind of equation which US and Pakistan shared historically, clearly that is not the case anymore. It seems to be deteriorating with each passing day.
Indeed, Rakwan, this is being interpreted as a New Year's message of sorts from President Trump to the Pakistani military and the civilian government in Islamabad. But just to recap what the President Trump has actually said in his tweet, he says, and I quote, "The US has foolishly given Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years, and they've given us nothing but lies and deceit." And it goes on to say that this cannot continue for long. Remember, this is the first instance since August earlier last year, when President Trump announced what he calls the South Asia strategy, which puts greater emphasis on cooperation among Pakistan, Afghanistan and India included in the US's strategy in Afghanistan. And to that extent, this is nothing but sort of a strong indictment of Pakistan's attitude and behavior over the last several months since the announcement of the strategy.
Indeed. And Ramesh, is it more of rhetoric, or does the United States actually mean business now?
Well, from all accounts, Raghavendra, this is yet another indication of the hardening of stance on the part of Washington against Islamabad, and one can expect more such statements to come out in the days and months ahead, especially if Pakistan does not change its attitude or behavior on the issue of terrorism, be that directed against Afghanistan or against India. Now, India says Pakistan cannot distinguish between terrorists operating either against Afghanistan or India, and that they must take action uniformly and consistently against all terror groups. Now, Pakistan, on the other hand, says it is taking action against the Haqqani network, which targets Afghanistan in particular, but turns a blind eye to those groups, including Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jamaat-ud-Dawa of Hafiz Saeed, which target India in particular. So, to my mind, one can expect a more hardening of positions on the part of Washington in the days and months ahead, especially under President Trump, who has categorically put Pakistan on notice and says, if you cannot target terrorists, let us know, we will do it ourselves. So it is an ultimatum of sorts, Raghavendra, to Pakistan.
Indeed, Ramesh, requesting you to stay with me on this story. Also joining us on the broadcast is Qamar Cheema. He's a defense analyst from Pakistan. Good evening, Mr. Cheema. Donald Trump saying that the United States had been foolish in giving Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the past 15 years. Your reaction to this, sir?
Well, if the United States president is himself saying that the United States is foolish, I think we should accept that, one thing. Second thing is that I think the United States was the anchor of global order before Donald Trump. The day gentleman has took over, the United States has gone into isolationism. Pakistan is going to be one such anchor in that story. The point is that the United States has failed to bring stability in Afghanistan. Even the Vice President Mike Pence was having a press conference on Bagram Air Base. He was not into Kabul. Secretary of State, United States, They have not gone to Kabul. Secretary of Defense has not gone to Kabul. They are having their press conference and meeting their foreign leadership on the military basis of the United States.
I believe we are having an audio connectivity issue with Mr. Kamar Chima. We'll try and reconnect to him in a bit. But going back to my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, Ramesh, it appears that the US is almost in a flip-flop kind of a mode when it comes to Pakistan. Initially, we saw strong words from Donald Trump when he assumed office. Then there was a time somewhere in the middle of last year, 2017, wherein Donald Trump made conciliatory noises towards Pakistan, saying the two countries have good relations, etc. And now, off and on, we keep witnessing these kind of moves wherein Pakistan is being put on notice every now and then by the United States. What do you make of this behavior or this conduct on part of the United States?
Indeed, Raghavendra. Now, any number of American commentators in the past, in the recent past especially, have said that the so-called ISI is a veritable extension of the Pakistani deep state, especially its links with the terrorist groups. Now, we've seen ever since August when Trump announced his South Asia strategy, he has put Pakistan on notice saying, if you cannot deal with terrorists yourselves, please let us know, please let Washington know. Washington will do everything it can on its own. That, to my mind, is a categorical, an ultimatum of sorts to Pakistan to ship up or shape out, given the fact that Pakistan's complicity and duplicity on the issue of terrorism is documented, it's in the public domain. Now, from Washington's perspective, it wants its South Asia strategy to succeed as opposed to the 16 or 17-year-old long war, which Trump says America is not winning yet. And to that extent, he says U.S. will pursue a conditions-based approach without setting a timeline, therefore suggesting that American troops will be stationed on the numbers might go up or come down depending on the conditions obtaining on the ground in Afghanistan, for which it wants Pakistan to come clean on the issue of terrorism, especially those groups which are operating both against Afghanistan and India in particular. And to that extent, Pakistan needs to take a call going forward very soon on which side of the divide it should find itself in, and how it should treat terrorist groups from here onwards.
Indeed. And also, Ramesh, we have seen the US making such noises when it comes to Pakistan, putting them on notice and, making these statements. But we recently also witnessed Pakistan telling the US and almost warning it against taking any unilateral action when it comes to Pakistan. Now, we have seen in the past that America, when it came to capturing and killing Osama bin Laden, it did engage in unilateral action. Pakistan has already been warning US of such action in the future. The relations between the two countries are only going downwards.
Absolutely. They are indeed headed southwards. It's an understatement of sorts, actually, given the once close ties between Washington and Islamabad. But that said, Raghavendra, many a commentator has said that, Pakistan cannot now claim victimhood, cannot now say that Pakistan is as much a victim of terrorism as any other country, including India, because once you rear snakes in your own backyard, they will come back to bite you sooner than later. That is exactly what is happening in Pakistan today. Given Pakistani deep state's complicity and duplicity on the issue of terrorism, one should not be surprised that the terrorist groups are turning back or turning on the Pakistani benefactors by attacking their targets. And that, to my mind, is an existential threat to Pakistan. Time has come for Pakistan to take a bold stance on the issue of terrorism and come clean, sever ties with all groups, and reassure its neighbors, including Afghanistan and India, that it will not be hand in gloves or run with the hen and hunt with the hounds on the issue of terrorism.
Hold that thought, Ramesh. Also joining me on the broadcast is strategic affairs expert Ajay Sahni. He's joining us over the phone line. Good evening, Mr. Sahni. United States President Donald Trump saying that the US had been foolish in giving Pakistan more than $33 billion in aid over the last 15 years. Your first thoughts, sir?
Well, I think there has been a growing sense in Washington for several years now that Pakistan is completely unreliable and has failed to fulfill its repeated assurances that it will act against terrorism and stop destabilizing the situation, especially in Afghanistan, which is the first priority for America. And finally, it seems that Trump is stating this more explicitly than has ever been the case before. But I would like to make a distinction that this is only a partial development. because Donald Trump's tweets are not necessarily American foreign policy. He has made these statements on the Twitter before on various issues, and those have not translated immediately into American foreign policy. But they do tend to indicate that America is now progressively marginalizing Pakistan in terms of its strategic calculus in this region.
Indeed, sir, and that is what I was coming to next. Do you actually see a real intent on part of the United States in its foreign policy towards Pakistan, or are these just rhetorical statements which keep coming out every once in a while?
No, you see, there has been a strategic shift already, very significantly from large and almost unconditional aid to progressive strangulation of aid, even where commitments had been made by America that some aid would be given. They were put against a requirement of certification by the Department of Defense that Pakistan had acted adequately against terrorism. And aid over the last few years has been progressively held back. So the aid has actually not been released to Pakistan, even to the degree committed by America over the last few years.
Right.
So the shift is already there. Whether the shift will be as dramatic as this particular statement by Trump indicates or not, because you see, the foreign policy establishment tends to be conservative and slow in its approach.
Right.
Whereas Trump as president has tended to be impulsive and, very hasty in much of what he says. So to what degree will this actually, and in what time frame? I would not say to what degree. I believe that this direction of progressive marginalization and punitive action against Pakistan is now a permanent process.
Right. And also, sir, can we sorry for interrupting. Yeah, please go on.
Yes. No. What I mean is it is a permanent process, but its pace is an issue. How quickly will this result in harsh action against Pakistan is a question. And as I said, foreign policy establishments tend to be very conservative and slow in their responses.
Indeed, sir. And also, where do you see Pakistan from here on? Can we expect any tangible shift in their policy vis-a-vis promoting or protecting safe havens on their soil, terrorist safe havens?
I do not see any indication, because Pakistan appears already to have factored, I believe incorrectly, but to have factored in an American withdrawal of support into its calculus, and believes that it has more than adequately replaced this support through its alliance and its relationships with China. So there doesn't seem to be any suggestion that Islamabad is going to, or Rawalpindi is going to, significantly change its orientation in the immediate future. It is only over time when they find that China is not very generous with its aid or assistance and tends to ask for more than its pound of flesh in return, then they will begin to find that they are being squeezed from all directions. But that will take much longer. As yet, the sense, both in Rawalpindi and Islamabad, is that they can balance out America's the decline of America, the relationship with America, through an improvement of relationships with China.
Right. Requesting you to stay on with the broadcast with us for a while more, Mr. Sahni. Going back to my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, who's standing by in WION's newsroom. Ramesh, US and Pakistan, there was a time when they were the best of buddies, all were the allies. Over a period of time, the relationship has been deteriorating. Is it now time for curtains almost?
Well, I would not want to second guess what Trump means, about his tweet which he issued just moments ago, as to what that might mean for Pakistan-US relations going forward. But just to take off on the point where Mr. Sahni left, to my mind, it betrays Washington's increasing impatience with Islamabad, and especially when I talk about Islamabad, I refer to the Pakistan military intelligence complex, as it were, which, as I said, has this uncanny knack of running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. And that manifests itself in the latter half of Trump's tweet, where he says, and if I can quote him, "They give safe haven to the terrorists we hunt in Afghanistan with little help, no more," unquote. So that clearly shows Washington's exasperation and impatience with Pakistan's attitude towards terrorism and terrorist groups operating in the region, especially those targeting Afghanistan. And to my mind, the subtext of Trump's tweet could be, he wants his South Asia strategy to succeed, which he announced in August this year, and his interest primarily lies in Afghanistan and those groups operating against Afghan and American interests in Afghanistan, namely the Haqqani group and other such terrorist groups. So to my mind, his focus or his interest is in ensuring the success of the South Asia strategy in Afghanistan, not so much as those groups operating against India in particular, which India says should not be the case, and that US must take equal interest or active interest in stopping Pakistan's support to those groups operating against India as well, including Hafiz Saeed's Jamaat-ul-Dawa and Masood Azhar's groups, all those groups operating against Indian interests, both in India and in Afghanistan as well.
Absolutely. And also, Ramesh, the fact that Pakistan's support to terrorist safe havens, it's been a topic of much debate all over the globe, and many countries have been pointing it out to Pakistan to stop this support to terror groups on its soil. Now, amidst this deteriorating situation, the kind of events we are witnessing between US and Pakistan, is it far-fetched to think that US could also engage in unilateral action against any of these terror groups which are operating from Pakistani soil?
Well, Raghavendra, that is very much a possibility and remains very much on the cards insofar as Trump's South Asia strategy is concerned. Remember, as I said before, none other than the top US administration officials have warned Pakistan in so many words, saying that if you do not take action against the terrorist groups which we want you to take action against, do it. Otherwise, let us know. We will do it on by ourselves. That, to my mind, is the current mood in Washington as we speak. And as I said, an increasing impatience and exasperation with Pakistan's complicity and duplicity on the issue of terrorism. But that said, the focus, as I mentioned before, Raghavendra, would be on the US interest in ensuring that its Afghan strategy succeeds, especially given that Trump has called for a conditions-based approach without setting any timelines, but increasing or reducing the number of troops depending on the conditions obtaining in Afghanistan, which would require Pakistan to come clean and to sever ties and to deny safe havens to terrorists operating against Afghanistan and India as well.
Right. Hold that thought, Ramesh. Going back to Mr. Ajay Sahni, who continues to be with us over the phone line. Mr. Sahni, where do you see India in all of this? The fact that India's relationship with America has improved considerably over the past few years. We are way past the stage where Pakistan used to be an ally of the United States and India was nowhere close to that status. Things appear to have changed completely over the years. Does the proximity between United States and India, which we have witnessed over the past few years, does it also factor in somewhere in United States dealings with Pakistan?
I think this is already visible in some measure. It is not still at a stage where we can be completely satisfied or that we are working in complete unison. But I think just last month there was this meeting on the mutual designation of terrorists and terrorist organizations, which means that America and India would consult one another in the designation of various individuals or groups engaged in terrorism, which would include groups acting against India. So there is already a progressive shift. Of course, America's priority will remain Afghanistan because its own forces are engaged there and are dying there. But as things change, we are already seeing that America is willing to work more and more closely with India. And already you are aware that several India-directed terrorist formations and individuals are already designated as international terrorists by America. So these things will progressively improve. I also believe that while Afghanistan remains America's priority, as the relationships with Pakistan deteriorate, America may not be so particular about distinguishing between Afghanistan-directed terrorists and India-directed terrorists. once they start acting against terrorists on a larger scale on Pakistani soil, they may begin progressively to target India-directed terrorists as well.
Right.
This cannot be said with confidence, but I believe that is what an attitudinal shift would occur, that these are terrorists, they are mutually designated as terrorists, they are recognized by Washington as terrorists, and therefore they are as dangerous to long-term American interests and should be targeted as well. I believe this will occur once America starts broader and more sustained operations against terrorists on Pakistani soil.
This is the big breaking story we have been tracking for you. Joining us on the broadcast is Vivek Karju. Mr. Karju, a big statement coming from Donald Trump. He's saying that the U.S. has been foolish in giving Pakistan so much of aid over the past 15 years, $33 billion. What do you make of these remarks, sir?
I think they reflect President Donald Trump's frustrations at the Pakistanis not responding adequately or positively to his August 21st policy statement on Afghanistan and South Asia. The problem is that during these months, the Americans have not been consistent in applying pressure on Pakistan, and therefore Pakistan is playing the Americans as it has all through the decades. If the Americans and President Donald Trump wants to crack the whip, then he has to do it applying great pressure and applying it consistently and forthrightly. It can't be 2 steps forward, 1 step backward,
right.
1 step backward, 2 steps forward. It can't be that, and that won't yield results.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Karju, for joining us with those perspectives. Also thanking Strategic Affairs expert Ajay Sahni and my colleague Ramesh Ramachandran, who joined us on this big breaking story.